Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope all of you can hear me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me? Yes, no. Now, what you can do is tap into the chat box. If you can hear me. Yes, can hear me. Huh? Great. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got only, thank you, right? Thank you, Sophia. Right. Thank you all. Right. Firstly, just a slight introduction. I'm Keelan, I'm a chartered accountant, and I'm not here today to sell you anything. I'm not promoting any software. I'm not doing any of those things that most of the people who do free courses talk about. Right now, I'm a chartered accountant and I speak for Quorse. And our topic today is, of course, e-invoicing. And I like to, before starting, right, point out some very big differences between normal income tax um, rules, laws, and e-invoicing. Now, you must remember, normally with income tax, they issue public rulings, right? Sorry, people, sometimes this happens, and that is why I rather type of it. Now, public rulings by IRB to now, I use the word tax laws because remember, income tax laws, right, are there for you to comply with when you do your tax computation, your tax submission. Now, they are all law-based. Now, on the other hand, for the first time, or one of the few times, for e-invoicing, has issued a guide. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what I hope to do is clarify the system of e-invoicing, firstly for you today. And number two, also to clarify. Now, notice the word language I'm using is to clarify that e-invoicing is a system and not the law. The law requires you to use this system. That's it, right? So please remember, it's not going to be as rigid as your tax laws are, where you've got deductibility, where you need to comply with certain things. With e-invoicing, because it's a guide to a system, there is a great, there will be flexibilities. It's not a perfect, and it's what all of us should know. It's not something that is going to be very rigid like tax laws, right? And that's the first thing I would like to assure you about, that income taxes keeps coming out with clarification. Whenever you hit a wall, they will come up with clarification. They came up with clarification 1 or 2 days ago, saying that the tax identification number, if it starts with a zero, don't key in the first 0 digit itself. So they will keep coming up with clarification, because remember, it's a system that you need to comply with, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with my presentation. Oh yeah, I will definitely take a break. Right? We will have a break between 10:45 a.m. and 11 p.m. And ladies and gentlemen, please remember, when you got a question, please key it into the chat box, whatever the question is with regard to e-invoicing, and I will do my best to clarify as much as possible. Right? So let's start. Okay, now. Now, the first thing is, when we speak about e-invoice, it's a digital representation. Now, many of you are already issuing electronic invoices. Now, electronic invoices are different from digital representation in terms that electronic invoices that you and I know can be prepared on, you can do it on PDF format or any format, and there are many formats here. Let's see. Right? Can you all hear me clearly? I think some of them have said that they can hear me. All right, ladies and gentlemen. There's a question here. Can you hear me? Right. Rosran said yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Right. So that's the first thing that we need to stress on. It's a digital representation. Now, when we use the word digital representation, that means that it is in a format that is not amendable. Oh yeah, a PDF format, right? PDF format means it's amendable. Digital format, you can't amend the invoice, right? You can't amend the invoice. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the first thing you must realize. It's about invoices that is not amendable. That means once it goes into the system, you can only change it by issuing another document, right? So it's all going to be non-amendable, right? An e-invoice contains, and then the other thing is that all invoices must contain the same essential information. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, many of you here get invoices from all your suppliers. From your suppliers, and you see that all the invoices are not consistent, where some of them are quite detailed, some of them are not detailed. Many of them are, how shall I say, inconsistent in the details. Whereas the e-invoicing system will ensure that all suppliers provide us with the same details, right? And the thing is this, price, quantity, right? Buyer's detail, price, quantity, price, excluding tax, total amount with the tax. So there will be a certain amount of standardization in the details of the invoices, right? Sorry, people, I've done something. Now I know what I've done wrong. Give me 1 minute. I must stop sharing. I do this sometimes. Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, right. So, okay, right. So now, of course, growth of the economy and all that, blah, 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 is fantastic. Now, what is different between Malaysian e-invoicing and the rest of the world? Well, one of it is the fact that we are going for business to business, but we are also going for business to consumer, which most of the world, all the countries I've looked at, they only go business to business. Now, we are going for business to consumer, simply meaning that e-invoices can be issued. Now, note my language, can be issued to the public, right? Not necessary, but can be issued, right? And they've got a variation to that. So we are going for business to consumer and business to government. So meaning that all commercial transactions in Malaysia come 1st July is planned to go towards e-invoicing. All commercial transactions. So you can be a person in the retail trade and you need to look at e-invoicing, right? Now, e-invoicing, well, they've allowed us two formats, right? Format specified is XML and JavaScript, right? Now, all other formats not allowed, and most of us don't have to worry about this because this is only relevant for those who are going to use the application program interface, right? So the people who are involved in the development of the application software interface, now they should be concerned that if there are only two formats, and the reason is quite simple, your invoice will not be amendable, right? Now, things like PDF, doc, and all that not acceptable anymore, right? Now, it is acceptable, but it is not acceptable for submission into the my invoice portal. Oh yes, right. Now of course we've got plenty of benefit here. One of it is unified invoice processing, blah blah blah. Very good. Now it should facilitate tax return filing because you will have a detail or summary of all the invoices you have issued, I mean all your income, and also a summary of all the invoices you have received. So for the smaller organizations who have got a problem with record keeping, this should be something that creates a system where it's easier for you to determine your income and your deductible expenses. Now, for larger businesses, ladies and gentlemen, especially those of you who have got ERP systems, and those who are waiting for 1st August anyway, right? There will be greater amount of automation, meaning the debits and credits. If your systems are structured well, now it's not going to be cheap, ladies and gentlemen. It won't be cheap, I assure you. But if your systems are structured well, you should be able to have your transactions recorded automatically. Oh yeah, it's very possible that all transactions, the debits and credits would be automated. As such, you don't need a person sitting there and doing the double entry, which we all hated during school. Now, for small, especially the micro, right, which is coming in 1st July next year, for MSMEs, the biggest advantage is that we can wait to see the issues that are cropping up with the large companies before we have to implement it come 1st July next year. Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, please remember, 1st August for the large companies, 100 million and above, that we'll talk shortly. But for the rest of us who are small, like me, right? I'm a one-man show. So for small people like me, I've got in July next year. And therefore, what happens is, I can be assured that by the time I've got to come into the system should be quite stable. It's been running for a while now, right? Now, here are the things that we need to watch out. All taxpayers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, anyone above the age of 18 would get an automatic TIN, tax identification number, which makes you a taxpayer. Now, when we speak about the word taxpayer, that means they've got record of you in the system. And if you are undertaking commercial activity, so if you've got a tax identification number and you're undertaking a commercial activity, now remember, selling your car is not a commercial activity. Okay, I've already switched on my camera. So it's for the rest of you, please switch on your cameras, right? Commercial activities, ladies and gentlemen. And roughly, should I stop the presentation? Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Okay, can we take the screenshot attendant for the second? Okay, hello everyone. Please open the camera.
Yes, Anne has on her camera. Ivy has as well. Only two. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, just on your camera for a short while. 2-3 minutes, they'll take a screenshot and then we will be done. Okay, we got it. Third person, fourth person, excellent. Hello.
Hello. Please open the camera.
Sunati on her camera, then off it again.
Yes.
Ah,
Anyone else?
anyone else?
Okay.
Ladies, gentlemen, any gentlemen? I mean, it's all ladies to you. We got Liu. Thank you, Liu.
Okay,
You
thank
are the
you.
only gentleman other than me.
Okay, all right. Everyone ready? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, ready. One, two, three, smile. Okay, done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's carry on with our right. As I was saying earlier, right? Sorry, people. Sorry. Right. Uh, all transactions. Now, if you're selling your car, that's not a commercial activity. So no e-invoicing. Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, remember, it must be a commercial activity, right? All individuals and legal entities. That means even if you're an individual selling goreng pisang on the roadside, now as much as I make it sound horrible, it's not that horrible. Oh yes, I'll come back to this shortly. Right, it's not horrible as what many make it out to be. You are required to comply with e-invoicing. So if you are an individual or a legal entity involved in commercial activity, e-invoicing comes in. Now, as you can see, they got association, body of person, branches. It's about all kind of entities, right? But remember, it's just not entities, it's also individuals, right? So, if I was to get into something like a transaction where I'm selling, I manage to buy some things in the kampong, come and sell it in KL, and go back to the kampong, buy and come and sell. I need to be involved in the e-invoicing system. Now, note the language I use. Involved doesn't mean it is always going to be sent, providing an invoice to everyone, right? Now, in relation to business to consumer transaction, where e-invoicing is not required by end consumer to support the said transaction for tax purposes, you will be allowed to issue normal receipt or invoice in accordance with current practices adopted by suppliers. Now, after a certain period or time frame, suppliers will be required to aggregate the normal receipt or invoice issued and issue a consolidated invoice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I was talking about just now when I spoke about the Nasilama seller as well as business to consumer, right? Now, issue a consolidated invoice. Right? So, for example, your Nasilama seller or your Goring, I mean, nobody buys Goring Pisang and expect an e-invoice to be issued for Goring Pisang, right? So, the Goring Pisang seller will have to, sorry, sorry, people, let me be more exact, 7 days, right? Sorry, and I should have added in within issue and right, unless the Right. Now, circumstances when the customer asks for an e-invoice, ladies and gentlemen, it only happens rarely. If say the customer fills out the client for entertainment, now we will speak about exemptions there, but otherwise, once a month, right? You got to tally up all your sales, issue an e-invoice, I mean a consolidated e-invoice, and that's the end of it, right? So for a year, 12 e-invoices when it comes to consumer, business to consumer businesses, right? People like the only, like I said, the only ones I see a problem with will be if someone brings their clients over for entertainment. Otherwise, I don't see a problem with e-invoicing when it's business to consumer, right? Because you would be issuing more often than not, you will be issuing a consolidated e-invoice, right? If and then that too, um, like I said, the pisang goreng seller is obviously not going to be issuing invoices to every customer. Then end of every month, 7 days later, within the first 7 days of the month, issue a consolidated invoice, consolidating all your sales. Right? And ladies and gentlemen, obviously at that point in time, it will be lebih kurang, isn't it? Because I'm sure the nasi lemak seller at the end of the day, or the goreng pisang or the kuih seller does not say I sold 10 kuih lapis and whatnot. So you will put it all together and report your income. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the most important aspect of the system is e-invoices are required to as a proof of income. Oh, yes. Document is issued when sale or other transaction is made and to recognize income of the taxpayer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if it is not income, you don't need an e-invoice. Firstly, it's not a commercial transaction. So if you're collecting deposits, there is no need for an e-invoice. Oh yes, if you're collecting deposits, there is no need for an e-invoice. The e-invoice is only issued if there is income, right? So for example, you collected deposit for, if you, and remember, advances are different from deposits. Advance is income. Deposit is not, right? So if you have got, I mean, if your company makes sales, definitely there must be an e-invoice. If your company makes, if your company is going to get into scrap sales, if you're selling scrap sales, if you're selling, sorry, interest income. Now, interest income with banks are a bit different, very different interest income from banks. Because remember, with banks, they will have to put the income and put the expense into it. So banks have a different system. But if you have lent money to someone on a commercial basis and you are earning an income, you need to issue an e-invoice. Now, that part very straightforward. Proof of expenses. Type of document covers purchase made or other spending by the taxpayer. Now, it also includes return discounts. Now, return discounts, you got your credit note. So, in the income tax system, when they use the word e-invoice, they mean credit note, debit notes, the whole works, right? Now, it can also be used to correct or subtract income receipt term, blah, blah, blah. In addition, certain circumstances where taxpayers would have to issue self-bill invoice to document expense such as foreign transaction. Now, sorry, people. Sorry, this is what I forget to do. Yes. Now, second issue. Now, the first one was, of course, this word consolidated e-invoice. Now, the second thing that we need to look at is something called self-bill. Oh, yeah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, self-bill for certain expenses that there is no e-invoice because maybe because of it's a foreign supplier. And you don't expect a foreign supplier to get into the Malaysian e-invoicing system, right? Obviously not. So you got to invoice yourself. Now, income tax have come forward and said even for you e-invoice yourself, right? So when we speak about agent, dealers, distributors, well, of course, to the everyone immediately goes on to the agents who are selling big things, the insurance agents and whatnot. Now, but going down to even as simple as people like me, right? Now, in my case, I am a Causeway agent, not because I'm doing the business, ladies and gentlemen. I joined Causeway many years ago when my son was born. I used to buy my diapers there because he sort of like was comfortable with their diapers. And I carried on being, and that was 25 years, 24 years ago. And I carried on being an agent, buying their biscuits and their mooncakes. I mean, I'm mainly mooncakes and biscuits from them, right? And therefore, technically, I get an income because when my purchases crosses a certain threshold, I get these vouchers. Now, obviously, I'm not disclosing my vouchers to income tax, right? Which is legally speaking non-compliance. But of course, if I go and tell income tax, they tell me, please don't disturb us, right, with these immaterial, insignificant issues. But the thing is, in the long run, Causeway will start issuing self-bill, right, to record their expense of giving me the vouchers, of giving me if I earn any income in terms of commission, they will self-bill themselves. So people, they also spoke about now, initially, they only spoke about foreign supplies. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, and this is what I mean. Everyone is so dead against the system. They just keep running down the system. That's all I've heard, right? In the coffee shop, right? They came up with first self-bill for foreign supplies, right? Because foreign supplies. Then they came up with agent, dealers, distributors, you know, the small people where you're paying the commissions, right? Fine. You self-bill yourself because you recognize their income, right? So in this case, when you do that, when you self-bill for agent, dealers, distributors, you not only recognize your expense, you're also recognizing their income and informing income tax of their income. Now, purchase from individuals who are not in business. For example, your company is buying my car. Now, assuming I'm not in business, or my car is not my business asset, it's my personal asset, and I sell you my car. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to issue an e-invoice. Or ladies, if you happen to have jewelry and you go and sell the jewelry to the jeweler, back to the jewelry shop, right, to get some money out of it. Right now, you're not in the business of selling jewelry, so you're not going to issue an e-invoice. The jeweler will now issue. And mind you, they started last year, October, with the first public guide. And these are clarifications which have been coming along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, the last clarification came in April, right? There was recently another clarification. So we expect to see more clarifications coming in with consolidated e-invoice and self-bill, right? Why? Because remember, these affect individuals. The last one, individuals, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, the system will keep evolving with time. Oh yes, it will definitely keep evolving. sorry, it will keep evolving, and you got to keep looking for, what do you call that? You need to keep looking for changes and whatever else that happens along the way, right? So you've got two things: proof of income as well as proof of expenditure. Now, proof of expenditure is important from the point of view of the company because you want tax deduction. For the individuals, proof of expenses can also be important because remember, you may want to prove that you spend money which you are entitled to reliefs. Like for example, lifestyle relief. You want to claim your lifestyle relief. You bought a smartphone. Ladies and gentlemen, you need a e-invoice. You paid medical for your parents in a private hospital. E-invoice, right? So those are the kind of issues you need to think about on a personal note, right? Now, invoices. You have got commercial document that itemizes and records transaction between supplier and buyer, which is fantastic to talk about, right? Right, but let's look at invoices a bit there. I mean, that one of the most important parts of the system, the documentation, right? Now, the first document we all know is your sales or revenue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, remember, pro forma invoice is an estimated, it's an estimated invoice which is issued to collect advances, right? Cash on delivery and those kind of things. May be used to record income because remember, a pro forma invoice is issued before the income is earned. Now, as far as income tax is concerned, fine. I mean, if you want to report your income earlier, they have got no issue, sir. They will not have any issue. Now, then you have got in, this is for those of you who are in import export, used for custom purposes. Not to be used and the reason is simple because your commercial invoice, as we call it, right, the one that you provide to custom is provided for them to determine the kind of duties and taxes. I mean, the import duties, export duty, the duties that export tax, import tax, all those. It's for them to determine that. So it cannot be used in the e-invoice system, right? Now, of course, you got your normal. Right, which is technically your this is the one that should be used to record your income. Oh yeah, right. This is the one that should be used to record your income, ladies and gentlemen. Technically speaking, in my case, I will always look at it in terms of your normal invoice, right? Even pro forma invoice, I wouldn't bring it into the system, but income tax doesn't care. Use it if you want, right? They really don't care. Now, the second document that you need to look at is your credit, right? It can be used to reduce an invoice, which means it cannot be issued unless you have an invoice. Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, credit notes cannot be issued by itself, right? Used to reduce an invoice. Oh yeah, you must take your reduction. And ladies and gentlemen, the main reason they mention the word reduction is because they have the right to disallow a credit note. And mind you, they may disallow the credit note at the point when you submit it, which is highly unlikely. Or it's not going to be when you submit it. It's just that they're going to look at the number of credit notes your company has issued over the year and then determine whether they are going to come in for a tax audit. When they come for a tax audit, then they will know, let me look at the credit note. If there are any which is iffy, it's not like you can issue a credit note Sukati anymore. Oh yeah, right? You make a sale, especially when it comes to intercompany sales, right? They may disallow credit notes, right? And that is why they want to see the reason. Now, then you've got increase and invoice. Ladies and gentlemen, now being someone who come from the 80s, I mean, I started working way back in 83, ladies and gentlemen, and we used to use debit notes when it was not normal sale, right? We sometimes use debit notes by itself to record other income, intercompany sales. Ladies and gentlemen, that must stop. Under the e-invoicing system, if there is no original e-invoice, there cannot be a debit note. A debit note must be cross-referenced to an e-invoice. Now, this same thing was something that they implemented during GST, which we brilliantly removed, right? And remember, they are bringing it in back because sales must be recorded by invoice. Debit note must only be used to reduce the invoice and under no other circumstances. We are people, under no other circumstance can a debit note be issued. A debit note must be followed after an e-invoice. So for those of you who are using like me, I mean, in those days, we used to use debit notes for many things. Sir. You cannot use a debit note to reduce your supplier. I mean, these are the misuses that I have experienced. We use debit note to reduce a supplier. We just send it to him and say, sorry, I'm not going to pay you anymore. In fact, there is one accounting software. If you look at it, I don't know whether they have updated it. When you go under purchases and drop down, it will show debit note. You can't use that. Right? Debit note must only be on your sales side. Now, then you've got a fourth document. Note. Right? Now, used to repay overpayments or used instead of credit note, right? It's used instead of a credit note, right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, remember, you do not use a refund e-invoice for return of deposits. Oh yeah, it's not for the return of deposit. It's purely if a particular customer returned the goods, they have already paid you cash. I mean, if you go to, for example, the best example I can think about is this, ladies and gentlemen. You go and buy something from, say, Mark and Spencer or one of these people, and their product is bad. You return it to them. I mean, they paid cash. You paid cash, and when you return it to them, you say that they can't find you a replacement, so they need to refund you with the money, right? They need to refund cash. You issue a refund e-invoice. Now, remember, it is not for return of deposits. A lot of people mistakenly, oh, refund can be deposit. No. Deposit is not income, not expenditure. It doesn't come within the e-invoicing system. So, ladies and gentlemen, the whole system evolves around this four document. And this is where the key is. Corrections, all type of correction will be based on this. Right? This is one of the cores that you must take note of, right? There are very few things which are core to this, right? And remember, right? So note, right? So the main note that I will stress on one transaction prevent double invoicing and things like that. And this is to prevent those things, right? So it's a good system, in my opinion, for companies that take the trouble to, instead of criticizing and saying cannot, who take the trouble to implement it, ladies and gentlemen, provided that you have been paying your taxes well and whatnot, you're going to see growth because you're going to have better recording of your transaction and therefore better information as well, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, it is something that I'm looking forward to. I hope all of you do too, right? So, the four things, right? So, if you've got any questions about this, please remember, especially the four document, key it into the chat box as and when it comes into your head, and I will deal with it when I see it, right? Now, you got Mr. Jamal here, right? Bought 200 shares, paid 2,000 ringgit, returned 8 shares. Now, because he had already paid cash, and probably he didn't want a replacement share, so instead of giving him replacement share, they had to refund him, they had to use this refund e-invoice, right? Now comes the time about the implementation stage. Now, taxpayers with an annual turnover, your revenue is more than 100 million in 2022, 1st August, right? Now, if you're already towards the end of June, they got a month, they got about a month left, and they are right now going through some of the 1st August companies are going through test stage with income tax. Oh yeah, the trial stage has already started for the large boys, right? Some of the large boys were selected and they went for and they're already testing so that the little bits of issues can be eradicated. Now, those with an annual turnover of revenue of more than 25 million and up to 100 million, sort of like medium company, 1st January next year, right? Now, the rest of us, like me, mine is 1st July. I mean, I'm not so big. So mine is below 25 million, right? And all the others, right? So after 1st July next year, everyone is onto the e-invoicing system. Now, one of the questions which has been posed to me is that what if I start on 1st August, but my suppliers are starting 1st July? Does not matter. Ladies and gentlemen, their focus will initially be on you recording their income or your income. They're not going to be specific about expenses till 1st July. Why? Because remember, there are plenty of people like me, that is, not in e-invoicing. Right? I'm not going to start e-invoicing. I mean, the earliest I will start is 1st July. But of course, I would think that by the time it comes down to my kind of people, the small ones, hopefully all my customers will self-bill themselves, something like that. So there can be changes of that nature. Right? And you can see on this slide, your threshold here is based on revenue reported in the year 2022, right? Now, anything, so if 2022 you were above 100 million, but 2023 you went down, doesn't matter, you still follow 2022 for threshold, right? Any taxpayer who commenced business in 2023, because they don't have a 2022 account, will have to implement it on 1st July 2025. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is implementation stage. Most small businesses will be here, right? And you got plenty of time to get prepared, right? Which means you got almost a year, plus a lot of clarification from income tax itself, right? Plus clarification from income tax. And that's the beauty of it. Okay, sorry. Okay. Now, exemption from implementing e-invoice. Well, the first slide here, ladies and gentlemen, is your royalties. I'm going to skip that in case I make any statement which is not appropriate. Government, you're not going to get any e-invoice from government department for your Cukai Tanah, Cukai Pintu, your license fee. No e-invoice. Which means, if you look at it from Majlis and all these people, whenever you pay for anything to the government, no invoice, including government hospital, multipurpose, all these no invoice, e-invoice. I mean, they are not issuing e-invoice. Consular officers and diplomatic officers. Now, consular meaning your embassies. If you're a foreign worker and you have to pay the embassy a certain levy or anything of that nature, no e-invoice. Ladies and gentlemen, very simple. Why no invoice? Because all of them don't have a tax identification number. Now, without a tax identification number, you cannot issue an e-invoice. Oh, yes, right? So all these people are not taxable entities. Being non-taxable entities, they don't have a tax reference number, no e-invoice. Sorry, people. Now, some of you will then the question comes to you is this. I've got supplier who don't have a tax identification number, but they can register a tax identification number. The people on the first two slides cannot register a tax identification number. Oh yes, people, they cannot get a number. So they cannot go for e-invoicing. Now, in many countries around the world who have implemented e-invoice, government can issue e-invoice, but in those countries, government is taxable. Oh yes, Malaysia government is not taxable, royalty is not taxable, embassies are not taxable. The three main classes of non-taxable people or entities: royalty, government, embassies. All three not taxable, they can't get a tax identification. Now, so we have looked at the system. Now, the first, like I said, the first most important thing is the documentation, right? Which is what I spoke about. Now, the second most important thing is the model, right? Now, there are two models that are available to you. Now, the first one, which is a My Invoice portal, which is hosted by IRB. Now, with the My Invoice portal, it's about you keying in your details of your invoice into the portal, and the portal creates your invoice. Oh yes, that means you don't need a invoice generator. Like the invoice can be generated using the My Invoice portal. Now, the second system is the API, Application Programming Interface, and I've given the definition here. API, in the context API, the word application refers to a software. Now, in simple words, it's a mechanism that enables two software components to communicate with each other. Now, the two softwares is your ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System, or your invoice generator, right? So that your invoice generator can communicate with the income taxes, My Invoice portal, right? So the API is a program actually. For those of you who are from the 90s, if you are from the 90s, we used to call it EDIs, Electronic Data Interface. As you know, the younger generation comes up with newer terminology to confuse old people like me. So there are, right? So that is why API. So remember, companies with a turnover of more than 100 million, those going in for August, are all using API. And that is why the hiccup is, because the interface is not working well. There are many times, I mean, the interface apparently is not integrated, not all interfaces, because remember, every company comes up with their own interface, and the interface, the integrating the interface is what's giving them a problem, right? And they hope that it will be resolved by 1st July. And I believe they will be. I believe they will be because many of the systems are working sufficiently well that they are already getting reject messages. That means the communication between the company's ERP or invoice generators and the income tax, the communication is taking place, right? So they are getting there, right? Now, now My Invoice portal, this is what all of us will be. I'm very sorry. I'm assuming you are all from small companies. If you are from a business which is smaller, ladies and gentlemen, we will be going for My Invoice portal. Now, your My Invoice portal will be part of your My Tax portal. Now, for those of you who submitted your Borang B or BE, B not yet, it will be 15th of next month, or your Borang BE, right? You would have gone into your My Invoice portal, you would have gone into your My Tax portal to submit your return form. Now, the day the My Invoice portal is ready, it will come out in your My Tax portal. Using your My Tax portal, you can click and get into your My Invoice portal. Oh yeah, it's going to be seamless, right? It will be seamless, right? If you notice my language, I seem to have a lot of confidence with income tax. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my first little bit of exposure to income tax, exposure to income tax started very long time ago, 79, 80, where I worked part-time in a small accounting firm, right? I used to go and do submission. And they've always been quite competent. Oh yeah, they've always been quite competent to the general public, right? So the My Invoice portal enables individual generation through comprehensive form and the option for batch generation. Now, this is where a lot of them are not looking at being a bit lazy, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Right. Now, you are allowed under the My Invoice portal individual generation through comprehensive form or batch generation . through spreadsheet upload. Now, if it's individual generation through a comprehensive form, it's like you will need to take all your details and fill up a Google documentation, a Google Doc or something like that, right? So the income tax, there will be a template, a Google form, a form, not Google necessarily, right? An LAGN form. You fill up the form and the My Invoice portal will then generate your invoice for you. Or if you are generating your own invoices, e-invoices, right, ladies and gentlemen, and you have got about, say you are in a business where you are generating about, say, 30 invoices a day, right? You can go for batch generation through spreadsheet uploads as well, right? Now remember, batch generation meaning 30 invoices on that same day. You put in the 30 invoices into a spreadsheet. The format will be in your My Invoice portal. You fill up the details, upload it, and end of it. Oh yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, My Invoice portal is a good thing in terms that your invoices will be generated through the portal, right? And that is where the biggest advantage is. You can either go for individual invoices or spreadsheets, right? And they will provide you with the format. Don't worry about it, right? Okay, right. For processing multiple transactions, and that is why when you do, oh, you only achieve what? No. I mean, end of the day, you still got to produce your invoices, isn't it? Right? Now, it's accessible to all taxpayers, meaning if you got a tax identification number, you can do it. Now, businesses that need to issue e-invoice, but API connection unavailable because it's too expensive for you. My tax contains all the functionalities required by taxpayers to perform e-invoice action. It allows you to generate your invoice, ladies and gentlemen. So for those of us who are, like in my case, ladies and gentlemen, my business, of course, we generate invoices in my practice. But when I do training with Quorse and whatnot, I don't put it through my business. What I do is I invoice in my own name, and I got to invoice one by one. What I take is I take last month's invoice, amend, and send it out. With My Invoice portal, no need. I can generate my invoice using the My Invoice portal. And to me, that is a very big plus for small businesses. Now, for larger businesses, well, you would have had your invoice generators. Now, those in between are the ones who have got a problem where you don't know to buy or not. Well, if you're not sure, don't buy. Don't buy an invoice generator, use the My Invoice portal. Now you can submit using the portal, view, cancel, or reject invoices. Specifically designated for the purpose all taxpayers to view and search for their respective invoices, which means that they will simplify a summary of your invoices. So there is no such thing as invoices going missing. Oh yeah. Provide a platform to taxpayers who are not able to issue invoice on the old system. Ladies and gentlemen, they are talking about me. For my training business, for my training income, I don't have any software. I don't even have pre-printed invoices. I just take the old one and then change the numbers and send it out. There have been times when I made mistake where I forgot to change the address and things like that. No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Taxpayer, and I'll show you why it's not going to happen. Now, you're required to log into My Tax portal. You get into that to utilize My Invoice portal to perform e-invoice formulation. So, ladies and gentlemen, it looks good for small businesses, right? Right. So, people, pause for 2 minutes. Anyone with any questions? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, anyone? Right. I've been speaking for about an hour, right? Anyone, ladies and gentlemen, any questions so far? Yes, no, maybe. Tuan. Are we okay so far? Yes. Well, since there is no question, I will just carry on forward, right? Now that is your My Tax portal. Now it should come out in your the My Invoice portal should come out in your My Tax portal within the next few months. API. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are for the big boys who got the money to create a software. Now, do we have APIs going on in the world right now? Of course. Now, if you are in the oil and gas industry, right, and you're dealing with Petronas, Shell, and all the big boys in the oil and gas industry, ladies and gentlemen, you can only invoice them using their API, which means that you must submit your invoice through their API. And the thing is this, you will download and save their API in your system, and you will use their API to submit invoices to them. Now, the reason being very simple, their API will then, the API will submit the invoice to them, and because it's going through an API, the language used will be, the API will translate your invoices in a manner where the system can read your invoices. So which means that since the system reads the invoices, the debit credits are automatically done and there's nothing for them to do. Oil and gas industry have successfully implemented API with all their suppliers. Now, I do not know of any other industries which are big enough to do it, but all the oil and gas, large boys, Shell, ExxonMobil, there are even some, I believe Shell and ExxonMobil uses the same API, right, to do it. So they've even got standard APIs. It developed quite a lot in that area. Now, enable business conveniently, transmit high volume of transactions. So the main thing for APIs is, ladies and gentlemen, high volume of transactions, right? Method to transmit e-invoice via API include direct integration, meaning like what happening in the oil and gas industry, where taxpayers ERP system with my invoice system, meaning that as taxpayer, you will link directly to the income tax through your own API. Your system, ERP system, will link directly to income taxes. Or you can go through a third party. Now, through PayPal service providers, non-PayPal technology providers. Now, PayPal is a technology which is been accredited as very secure, right? Now, this e-invoice system starting up in Malaysia. Now, the excitement is maybe 5, 10 years, maybe after I'm dead, probably. The whole world will be on the same system, whereby you can submit your e-invoice to your customer in Japan, right? And a Japanese company will probably send you their e-invoice without a problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, now at that stage, they would expect all of us to go through an accredited service provider using a technology which is deemed acceptable internationally. So there are PayPal service providers in Malaysia. So you can connect with income tax using this. Or you can go through non-PayPal technology providers. Now these are normally local technology companies, right? And they've not been accredited, or they don't use the same technology as PayPal, which may not be acceptable overseas. PayPal is the most common technology which is used internationally. So Malaysia gives you 3 different options. You go direct to the system, or you can go through a third party. So between the third party owns the API. And if you build your own API, you must pay for API development cost. If you go through PayPal service providers or non-PayPal technology providers, you need to pay subscription. That means you pay monthly or number of transactions submitted or something like that, right? So income tax is all 3 possible. Now, the problem is, of course, upfront investment technology, adjustment to existing systems, which is very likely, right? You need to make adjustment to your side, because remember, income tax is not going to make any adjustment to their side. Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, unthinkable for them to make an adjustment. API connection may be made directly to IRB or through blah blah blah, right? And it's normally for people who have got substantial transaction volume. So people, if you've got very small transaction volume, why do you want to pay to connect with Incomex? You might as well go into my invoice portal and just back away, isn't it? So, and that's why people companies with very large number of transactions. Notice, I'm not even saying large volume of sales, large number of transactions. They will go for API. Otherwise, your accounting staff would have a serious issue. Right? Now, this is one of the most, sorry, people, important slides. Right? Issue of e-invoice. When a sale or transaction is made, right, including e-invoice adjustment. Now, your e-invoice adjustment feature, credit note, debit note, as well as refund note. So, sorry, people, whatever I'm talking about now, right, is not just invoice, it is also credit note, debit note, and refund note. Right? You create it and shares it to IRB via my invoice portal. That means you will submit your invoice to income tax. Once you create the invoice, you submit it to income tax. Now, income tax will then validate the e-invoice. Now, IRB's validation is performed in near real time, ensuring e-invoice meets the necessary standards and criteria. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when we speak about validation process, please take note. IRB system all the necessary features, right? But a validated invoice is not sorry people, it's always necessarily now what do I mean? Very simple. Your e-invoice must contain the buyer's TIN. I mean, if you are issuing a full e-invoice to the buyer, must contain the buyer's TIN, tax identification number. It doesn't mean it's a correct number. It merely says, yeah, there is a number, right? Like, for example, when you fill in, I mean, I'm flying off overseas today. Now, I just, before I started this program, I went and checked in, and they asked me for my passport number for checking. I keyed in my name and I keyed in my passport number. Now, the system checked whether, based on the fact that I'm a Malaysian, the passport number had the necessary digits. The number of digits must be accurate. I mean, the number, but they cannot confirm whether that's my passport. And I could have easily keyed in someone else's passport number. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen. So please remember, a validated invoice merely requires certain information, right? Sorry, people, got to change this word. Necessary information, right? It doesn't mean it's accurate or correct, right? It merely says you've got this. Like for example, the current clarification given by IRB is that if anyone text identification number starts with a 0, you must ignore the 0 when you key it in, because the system will reject or not validate any invoice where the tax identification number starts with a 0. Right? So people, that is what validation is. The name of your buyer, right? Your address. I mean, there is a name for your buyer, there is an address for your buyer. So the necessary things have been filled in, right? Now, if you go, I mean, we don't have time today to go through it in detail, but if you go through the guide issued by income tax, there are some features where, in some instances, where you put that not applicable, but you fill up the necessary areas. I mean, you fill up the necessary information. Right? That's all it's saying, and that is what validation is about. Right? Now, once validated, sorry, people. A unique identifier number, which means all your invoices will now have your invoice number, and will also have a unique identifier number, which means that unique identifier number, no invoice will have the same number. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, no invoice is going to have the same number, which means that there cannot be duplicates. Oh yes, as far as income tax is concerned, there cannot be duplicates, right? So, how does this affect us, right? Two taxpayers cannot claim the same invoice. But don't worry, this part will come. I mean, this part will definitely come one day, right? After 1st July next year, right? So, for example, a company issues an invoice, it goes through the system, right? It gets validated, all that done, everything fine, fantastic. Now, you can't have the same invoice where two different companies with almost similar name claiming, which is happening right now, right? I mean, if you buy a smartphone, right? Now you can't claim your lifestyle relief, and then your brother claims your lifestyle relief, another sister claims the same thing as lifestyle relief. You pay for your parents' medical, kind of. I mean, you can claim the maximum amount, the little you can give it to your parents, fine. But the minute the same invoice number comes in, income tax will be able to detect it. So this unique identifier number is something that will allow income tax to track every single invoice which have been submitted to them. Oh yes, right. Unique identifier number will allow traceability by IRB and will reduce instances of tampering with e-invoice. That means once the invoice goes through validation, to go and change it, and I mean, one of the things that will happen, which is what big companies are happy about, is that the chances of fraud will be tremendously reduced. Now, next issue. IRB will inform both the supplier and buyer once e-invoice have been validated via My Invoice portal or API. Now, another issue. Sorry, people. they will inform the buyer and the seller of the validated invoice. Now, note they will only be notifying them, informing them. Look, they will say probably Quorse has submitted an invoice which is not currently validated, right, in your name. Full stop. Details, and the thing is this, they are not going to send you the invoice, they will say, now, now, initially they said it will come to the My Invoice portal. Now, in the more recent guides, they have spoken about email. Right? Notification will be by emails. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just a suggestion. And remember, like I said, this is a system. Right? And a system can have some amount of flexibility. Notification will be by email. May be advisable to yes. I mean, think about it. You get, I mean, you are issuing about, say, 10 or 15 invoices a day, and you are receiving about 20 invoices a day. It's about 35 to 40 invoices. So 35 to 40 emails coming in from IRB. Now, if you've got plenty of email, I mean, if you've got more than that, right, you don't want any of the emails getting lost with your other business emails. Right. So to me, my suggestion to all is that I believe it's advisable to create a specific email for your company to communicate with income tax. Oh yeah, people, a separate email totally, right? And I'll tell you why. It should be monitored by more than one staff. I know why, because remember, if someone goes on leave, you want to make sure that there's someone monitoring. I mean, we had a scenario just after the lockdown where income tax, just after the first lockdown, in between, where income tax had emailed one particular client of ours and said that we are coming in for a tax audit. And the problem was that the financial controller had been knocked down by COVID, and his was a very long COVID issue. So the thing is, nobody monitored the email. Income tax turned up and nobody knew about it. Right? So more than one staff is income tax. And income tax, we all know, only communicates through email. They're not going to call you. Not unless they. The only time we know that income tax call client is seeking further information after an audit has commenced or an investigation has commenced. Otherwise, everything is by email. Right? Even they wish you happy birthday by email, people. So, create my advice to all taxpayers is, especially if you are going to be part of an e-invoicing system, like in my case, the day I get into the invoicing system, I have a separate email address for them. Gmail, doesn't matter. I'm going to create a Gmail account just for income tax, right? Now, upon validation, the supplier is obliged, I mean, you must share the validated e-invoice embedded with a QR code with the buyer. Now, the QR code, sorry people, yes. Now, the QR code will be issued by income tax, and you must make sure. Now, if you have created your invoice using your MyTax portal, the system should have embedded it. Now, if it's not been embedded, you must make sure it gets embedded, right? All validated e-invoices must have the QR code, people. Oh yeah, no QR code, double right? That is the next thing that you need to do. And you must look at it, right? Now, the QR code can be used to validate the existence and the status of e-invoice via the My Invoice portal, right? So, meaning the QR code is what you would use to, I mean, the buyer would use to validate and say, yeah, it's okay. Now comes a difficult one, ladies and gentlemen, where people don't seem to understand rejection and cancellation of e-invoices. Upon issuance of e-invoice, a stipulated period of time, which is 72 hours, are given to buyer to request for rejection of e-invoice. Right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, a very important part of the system is that buyers can only request for a rejection right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it must be with justification. Oh, yeah. Now, without justification, you can't request. Now, two words, which is important, only request and justification. Now, which means only the seller, the issuer of the invoice is the only one who can reject it. Now, the whole world can't go around rejecting. I mean, it's totally unfair. I mean, I sell you some goods, I send the goods to you, I invoice you, and then you reject it. No, it cannot work. It's not legal in the first place, right? Only the seller can cancel the invoice. The buyer can only request for rejection. The language, the buyer can only request rejection. The buyer has no right to reject the invoice. Once the invoice is validated, you share it with them, they do not accept their problem. It is a sale to you, it's an expense to them, it's a debt due to you. Right? Now, both both rejection and cancellation another distinction between anything else income tax has done and this one. For the first time, they talk about it in terms of hours. Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, in all my life, and I've been around for quite a while, right? In all my life, I've only heard of income tax talk about days or months. For this alone, they speak about 72 hours. Now, which is why it is my belief that 72 hours is 72 hours. There's no such thing called Saturday, Sunday. Within 72 hours, you can make changes. Right? Now, remember, can be cancelled and reissued. Within 72 hours of validation. So, what happens if something goes wrong, right? Now, after 72 hours, is deemed accepted. Sorry, people. Is deemed accepted, right? But it's not the end of the world, right? It's not the end of the world. Sorry, people. Sorry. Now, if errors of right after 72 hours, then the adjustment must be made. Now, the other document will be your credit note, debit note, or your refund note, right? So, even after 72 hours, ladies and gentlemen, sorry, it's not a problem, right? You still can make the adjustments, right? You still can make the adjustment. It's just within 72 hours, you can cancel, and the issuer can cancel and reissue, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the end of the world if just say you get an invoice from your supplier, there's a mistake and you don't spot it, or you don't correct it, or you don't tell them about the mistake within 72 hours. It's not an issue. Even after that date, 2 months later or 1 month later, you have not paid and you want to make a, and you tell them, sorry, the amount is wrong, and you prove it to them, they can then issue a credit note or a So people, it's not the end of the world, right? Um, Another area where a lot of people go around saying the system is very rigid. It's not. It's not at all rigid, right? So people, the rejection and cancellation process is also important. Now, there is something called the My Invoice portal. Supplier and buyer will be able to obtain a summary of e-invoice transaction via My Invoice portal. So, which means that all of you can go to yours, I mean, yours personally, if you are in business, your companies, right? E-invoice portal, and you will get a list, a summary of all invoices issued and all invoices supplied to your company. Oh yeah, you will get a list there. So this is the overview of the system. So the first, I mean, the important thing so far, which to me important, that all businesses should be aware of. One is the document, one is the issuing process. Oh yes. And ladies and gentlemen, number 5, very important. Number 4, make sure that when you're sharing the e-invoice to your customer, make sure it has a QR code. If there is no QR code, it's not a validated e-invoice. And if you receive an invoice from your supplier, make sure it has got a QR code, right? If it's got no QR code, you can't validate it. Now, pre-submission. Now, you need a digital provision of digital certificate. Now, you need a digital certificate to prove that you are in business. Now, this would be for people who are going to issue it via the API. Now, a digital certificate will be issued based on your tax identification number. Now, these are for big businesses, right? Ladies and gentlemen, and your digital certificate will have a validity of 3 years. So please remember, if you're getting into business, all of you need a digital certificate, right? And the digital certificate, right, will give you your will be based on your tax identification number, and you will get your digital signature, right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, please remember, digital signature is a long sentence-like kind of a thing, where even if you were to copy the digital signature from the paper to the system, you will make a mistake. So it will be something where you need to input it directly into the system. So it is for APIs. Now, when a sale or transaction is concluded, including e-invoice adjustments such as debit note, credit note, or refund note, you create your e-invoice and submit it via My Invoice portal. Now, assuming that you are using the My Invoice portal, ladies and gentlemen, you will go for individual creation. Can create e-invoice individually by completing a form, right, with all the required fields. Oh yeah, people, your required fields is something we will talk about shortly, which is the third most important thing, right? You need to know your document, you need to know the process. Second, you will log into your My Invoice portal through your My Tax portal. Oh yes, you will go through your My Tax portal to your My Invoice portal. Now, that is for generation. Or you can generate a certain amount of e-invoices in batches by uploading a defined layout file to the portal. Now, the defined layout file you can obtain from your My Invoice portal. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's not available yet, containing the necessary invoice information. Now, if you're using one or two, please note that the My Invoice portal will be the one that is going to generate your invoices. Once validated, which is done in near real time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people have spoken about this word near real time. Now, initially, we all made a joke about it, stating that near real time can be hours. Now, ladies and gentlemen, income tax is going to come up with a apps. Oh yeah, people like me, small business, right? Very small business, right? I should be able to download an apps onto my smartphone and issue e-invoices consolidated e-invoices using my apps. Now, in the latest guide, now, ladies and gentlemen, there has been 3 guides. Oh yeah, there has been 3 guides. Sorry, I need to. I mean, being a half-day program, I could not. I can't get on to many things. But ladies and gentlemen, um, right now the first one was. Now they revised it in 2024, right? Now, clarification was given in. Now, you've got the guide and you got a specialized guide, right? So people, please remember, whenever you look at things, get to the latest one, right? And you will, and you must understand that up to May this year, up to 2 days ago, the format or template for the spreadsheet is not out yet. It's not out yet, right? So when it's out, because remember, like I said, they are focusing on the large players who are all looking at API now, right? Oh yes. Now, and there's like one, sorry, people. So remember, you got 2 options. To most of us small people, if you are a small business which are and you got to issue quite a lot of invoices, ladies and gentlemen, please go for batch generation. Right now, question, right? So a good time to speak about something like when must the e-invoice be issued? Well, when a transaction takes place. I mean, I've got all these questions about different industries. I've got people who come in and say, oh, in construction, we must wait for the architect certificate. Yeah, fine. Base it on architect certificate date, right? Issued when transaction takes place. Now, exception. Sorry, people. Is the consolidated invoice, which must be issued after the end of the month. You got 7 days, ladies and gentlemen. But remember, and that is why when income tax talks about this, they will always say, oh, people will definitely issue invoice as fast as possible. Because remember, if you are into credit sales, if you delay the issue of the invoice, you are providing the customer with a additional credit period. So you will definitely issue it as soon as possible, right? So ladies and gentlemen, issue of invoice is very important, right? And within and the date, and you will go by the date. Now, even though validation may take place later, but that doesn't mean that we are going to be delaying the recognition. So whether it's individual or batch, you normally issue the invoice as and when it occurs, right? Now, once validated near real time. Now, when they came up with the apps, right, which are coming up, and they said that near real time will be 2 to 3 minutes from the time you submit your invoice. They say within 2 to 3 minutes they should be able to validate your invoice. Right, within 2 to 3 minutes they should be able to validate your invoice. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's quite fast. Right, the validated invoice will include an IRB unique identifier number, date, time, validation. Right, and mind you, it will also give you the date and time of validation because you got 72 hours for requesting rejection and cancellation. Unique identifier number will allow traceability by IRB and will reduce instances of tampering of the e-invoice. Ladies and gentlemen, it's in this system. How are you going to tamper it anymore? E-invoice is written, unvalidated, and error message will be displayed. Supplier is required to correct the error and submit it for validation again once the error has been corrected, right? So meaning you will resubmit the same invoice once the error has been corrected, right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop here now, right? Coming up to 10:45. Let's take a short coffee break, toilet break, whatever you want to call it. Please come back by 11 p.m. Right? Please come back by 11 p.m. so that we can carry on. Talk about the kind of errors that can take place and what you need to look at, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, let's take our short break now. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I've come back and let's look at the kind of things that can go wrong, right? And here you see they talk about validation, right? Now, if it returns unvalidated, it simply means that the invoice that you submitted may not have some of the necessary features. Now, we don't have time to look at all of that today, but I'm going to show you some of the features that you can look at, right? I've got it a separate thing here. Now, the kind of appendix A, I mean, this is, even if it's like me, on my personal note, I must have my IC number. Oh yeah, it's not good enough that it's only my tax number. They want me to put in my IC number, right? Sorry, if I am issuing an invoice. And of course, SSD number, kalau ada. And that is why they say mandatory only if you have. Tourism number, same thing. I mean, these are for hotels, right? Only kalau ada. So, and I mean, you can't submit an e-invoice without an email address. You and I know it, but there are people who come and tell me, oh no, don't ever. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for all of you in business, your MIC code is going to be critical. Now, if you put the wrong MIC code, it won't be an issue. Why? The system will still validate your e-invoice. But ladies and gentlemen, it will give you issues when you submit your tax return because with the wrong MIC code, the system will then detect expenditures which is not normal for your industry, that kind of little things. But we don't worry about it today. MIC code is compulsory, must put in. Now you need to have the bias thing. Now, kalau ada. Now, in a commercial business, tada, foreign supplier, tada, there is something called giving him the validated invoice, telling him there is a validated invoice. So in which case, if there is no invoice for the general public, there is going to be no validation taking. I mean, validation will take place, but they won't have a chance to accept or reject. There won't be any rejection. And then you see the digital signature. Here you see the sample of the QR code. Right? Now this is business to business. Business to consumer, we are not going to get all. I mean, it will be there, but they are not going to see. Then you get your this one, and then you get this. Now, it's a visual representation of an e-invoice, ladies and gentlemen. And mind you, I'm going to show you another sample, right, just for you to get a rough idea what it's like. So that you understand it's not a nightmare like what many people make it up. Now, this is a restaurant. Now, being a restaurant, you will have to submit an e-invoice, probably consolidated e-invoice, right? Meaning putting many sales together. So, your details, your company's details, same as what above. Now, look at it. General public, because it's consolidated e-invoice, we use the general public tax identity, which was the same as above for the earlier one, Mr. Su. Buyer's name, we just put the general public law. How can we go and ask each person coming into our mama shop, what's your name? Then it will happen. And then you see all the, when it comes to general public, all these can be, you can put there, not applicable to cover. General public, they are giving us flexibility. You just put that not applicable, right? And then you list down all the sales, and you can see the date here. 1st August, that means assuming this is the consolidated invoice for July 2024, right? So for the month of July 2024, the restaurant consolidates their invoice on the 1st, they got 7 days, mind you, right? On the 1st of August, and submits income tax. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a nightmare, because everybody keeps talking to me about, oh, it's nonsense. How can the goreng pisang seller do? Now, as far as the goreng pisang seller is concerned, he can always put his classification. He can say goreng pisang 004, kelede 005 or something like that, and say, or rather, the description food, the description will be sales 1, sales 2, sales 3, if he's got a record, right? And put the figures in, right? And mind you, this is again for another restaurant. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all these examples I'm showing you are available on the guide, LATN guide, right? Guide to e-invoicing. It's there, right? So people look at it. Not applicable is allowed, especially when it comes to general public. Now, obviously, if you are business to business, you're not going to see not applicable, because you would not be selling to someone who you don't know. Unless, right, walk-in customer. I mean, of course, people have thrown so many different variety of things to me. They say, oh, I am a hardware shop. What about somebody who walks in? Then general public law. They walk in, the walk-in sale will be general public. They pay by credit card, no problem. Right? So people, excuses a lot of people have, but I don't think most of the excuses are valid. Oh yes, they are all not really valid excuses. It's just that we need to do some work, right? So if there's an error in the validation, remember you didn't put that not applicable for address. It may come back and ask you, hey, where's the address? That doesn't mean they want the address. It's a general saying to the general public, so it's not applicable, right? And ladies and gentlemen, it's a system, right? It's a system. So you need to start understanding the system, and it's not about the law. Notification, ladies and gentlemen, yes, notification will notify both supplier and buyer via, I mean, they use the word via my invoice portal. An email will be sent for this notification. So the email will be sent to you, right? Create an email which is linked to the my invoice portal, so that when an email comes in, you click on the email, you go to the My Invoice portal, you can either accept the invoice from supplier or request for a cancellation, or if you are the seller, you find a mistake, you can reject it. I mean, you can cancel and reissue. Supplier is obliged to share the validated e-invoice embedded with the QR code provided by IRB with the buyer. Now, you must share the QR code also. Can be used to validate, blah, blah, blah. I told you that. Right. Right. Now, this is the part I spoke to you about just now about the 72 hours. Once e-invoice has been validated by IRB, supplier and buyer are allowed to cancel or reject the e-invoice within the stipulated period. Right? And the stipulated period is 72 hours. If e-invoice contains errors, buyer is able to request a rejection of the e-invoice within 72 hours from the time of validation via My Invoice portal. Now again, I will stress, ladies and gentlemen, request, and you can request for the rejection, right? They can't reject your invoice. Right? Right? You can't reject it. Now, the rejection request should specify the reason and can include wrong invoice data as any field. Example, SST number, business registration number, and any business related, etc. Now, a lot of people have asked me the question, Tina, how do we, sorry, people, some of the scenarios that people have put forward to me are very easy, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, like I said, it's still very flexible, right? Errors in the cancellation, right? Um, Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the one that I would be most concerned about. Now, why would I be concerned about error in the tin? Well, very simple. It would be concerned, I would be concerned about error in tin because remember, the tax identification number, if I'm the buyer, the tax identification number will be what income tax uses to track even my expenses. So, if the tin is wrong, right, the invoice will go to some other company's account. It won't come into my account. Now, since it doesn't come into my account, ladies and gentlemen, when I claim a tax deduction, there's going to be a problem. Oh, yes. If it's a big amount, there can be problems with errors in tax identification number, buyer's name. Now, then of course you can have your SST. Sorry. They mentioned this SST number. Now, this maybe one day customs will also track e-invoices to confirm what is reported in the SST02 form. Oh yeah, they could be tracking, so it can give problems there as well. Now, so within 72 hours of right? So within 72 hours, fantastic. You cancel and you reissue, right? But ladies and gentlemen, what happens? What happens after 72 hours? The errors now, ladies and gentlemen, I do not generally speak about the refund note on simple grounds that I don't see it happening in my life, and I don't see refund notes coming in for most of you. Refund notes will come in for those who have got a cash-based transaction, right? Where you got to give back the money. Right? Most of us will say, "I know, okay, right? I will give you a substitute product or something like that." Right? So I'm not going to touch on the refund note too much. Error must be corrected using credit note or debit note. Now we can look at a few examples. Error in value, well, credit or debit note issued. To correct the amount. Right? True. I mean, that's what's happening there, right? But the problem came when somebody asked the question whether, what about happens to me, right? But lucky for me, it's not on e-invoicing, where I put in, or rather, when I amended the invoice, right? I forgot to amend the buyer, who the buyer is, right? I forgot to amend and address it to the correct line. So what happens is somebody issued the invoice to the wrong buyer. Well, and this is where I'll tell you this. Issue a and you issue a new invoice. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you just cancel the whole thing. Using a credit note, you cancel the whole thing and you issue a new invoice. Right? Because, ladies and gentlemen, errors are there all the time. And it's not like we got, I mean, you can't have a system where they don't allow you to correct things up. Right? So, for those who have been hearing this thing about, oh, the system will kill me, no, it won't. Right? There may be, I mean, till you get used to the system, there may be an additional 10 or 20% extra work. But once you get to the system, I believe that most of us will be very comfortable getting into the system to an extent where once we get used to it, we can't do without the system. Hmm. So people issue a credit note, and I believe that, sorry for being very this one. The issue that took place, I mean, I saw what went wrong during the GST era. All the training was attended by managers and very senior people, when the GST recording was going to be done by clerical and executive level people. Now, the same thing here. Clerical and executive people who are really involved in the invoicing, which is normally your accounting, finance, sales, the people who are doing the invoicing, negotiating, because they are the ones who should be comfortable with the system. right? They are the ones who should be trained on the system, right? Failing which, because the senior manager is not going to look at the e-invoice, right? You don't invoice at all. And one day you will even forget how to invoice, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, even after 72 hours, it's not a nightmare. Now, within 72 hours, right? Sorry, people. Errors detected within 72 hours, you don't have to issue credit or debit note. Errors detected after 72 hours, you still correct it using credit or debit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes errors can be even detected 3 months later. I mean, it's happening now, right? I send an invoice, the client, my firm sends an invoice, the client doesn't pay, right? Secretarial fees, most people pay 3 to 6 months later. Now, when they're going to pay, that's when they come and tell you, oh, there's a mistake here. Right? One of the staff made the mistake. Fine, we correct it. Under the system to boleh, bukan tak boleh correct, can be correct. Right? Things can be corrected. Right? So people, 72-hour threshold is merely not to use credit and debit also. Right? Supply to perform cancellation. So remember, buyer initiating rejection request within 72 hours, but you must take why. What is the reason for the rejection? Right, sorry, people. Now, what is the reason for the rejection? Now, the buyer, seller is the one who can cancel. I think I've stressed on that enough, right? If invoice is not rejected or canceled within 72 hours, no cancellation would be allowed. Subsequent adjustment, lagi boleh. You use credit note, debit note, or refund note, right? E-invoice running number remains consistent with the issuance to from issuance to validation, right? So that means the e-invoice number till validation must remain the same, and even after validation, right, it must be the same, except for if you cancel. Cancellation process is similar to issuance. Now, once you cancel, you reissue the e-invoice and you go on with life, right? Now, stationery hub that supplies stationery generates e-invoice for sale of 50 stationery items purchased by Mrs. Kim on the My Invoice portal. Submit e-invoice for validation. Upon validation by IRB, both Stationery Hub and Mrs. Kim are notified. Mrs. Kim receives a validated e-invoice from Stationery Hub Sandhya Bharat. Mrs. Kim is responsible to check e-invoice for accuracy and completeness. In the event e-invoice contains errors, Mrs. Kim is able to request a rejection of e-invoice via My Invoice portal within 72 hours from time of validation. Now, looking at this simple example, right? Ladies and gentlemen, okay, let's look at this real simple. Sorry. Wrong. Ah, acceptance of provides consumer sale to the general public, right? It's not required, right? You don't require someone to come and accept the invoice simply because you don't have the details, right? You don't have the details, right? Consolidated invoices will be validated, right? It will be validated. But acceptance by customers, not possible. It's not possible. But cancellation by seller is possible. It may be better to correct errors. Ladies and gentlemen, you have keyed in 40 invoices or 40 transactions into your consolidated invoice. You uploaded it into the system, and then you know that you made an error in two of it. So within 72 hours, you want to make a correction. Fine, you make a correction, but do you want to cancel the whole consolidated invoice? No, you don't. So what do you do? Wait for 72 hours, correct it using credit or debit. Oh, yes. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, in this case, your credit or debit note will be used as correction, but you are going to send it to no one. It will still be to the general public. Right? The details of a credit or debit note issued to correct the consolidated invoice detail will also be general public. Right? It will also be general public, right? So no big confusion here. Like I started off the day by saying it's still a system, ladies and gentlemen. As such, that it cannot be a nightmare. Like many people make it sound to be a nightmare. It's not. Now, step 8 is quite interesting. All accepted and validated e-invoice submitted via My Invoice portal. And remember, whether you're using API or My Invoice portal, it's all going back into the My Invoice portal. Oh yes, even API is connecting to the My Invoice portal. So will be stored by IRB database. Notwithstanding the storage of e-invoice by IRB, taxpayers are reminded to retain sufficient records and documentation in relation to the transaction. Meaning, sorry, people. Oh. 1 minute, please. Right. I like to talk about this because it's not just, this is not because of e-invoicing, but generally about income tax. Must maintain all necessary uh, Documents will be your for documents and any other now, the other documents that can be used to substantiate transaction will be your agreements and things like that, right? Company policy agreement, and you must retain it for 7 years. Now, records will be your sorry, the wrong language. Which many people don't understand is your you need to keep your payroll records, your records meaning the accounting system, right? Your payroll, you need to save and keep your monthly payrolls, your monthly inventory system, right? Your monthly accounting, all your debit credits, your trial balances, especially your trial balances and financial statement. Now, monthly inventory record, monthly payroll. So distinguish between the two because many people think that maintaining documents counted. Ladies and gentlemen, maintaining documents is not accounting. You need to keep both documents and records, even though they've got the others. I mean, even though income tax has got a record of all your invoices, they want you to maintain it as well, right? Yes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you got any question, please key it into the chat box. As you notice, I'm not stopping for 10 minutes and say, oh, question time and things like that, on grounds that I would like to cover as much as possible because we've only got 4 hours. This is normally we have a day or two call, 1 day or 2 days course, right? But this is a half-day course, so please key in if you got anything coming up to my key in. Right. Now, when your API creates the invoice, because remember, 2 systems, right? One, you create your invoice and submit income tax, or you use the My Invoice portal. Now, if you create it and submit income tax using API, then you must use XML or JavaScript. But when it comes to reporting and dashboard services, now here you notice that in order to sell the My Invoice portal to all of you and make you happy, they are now telling you that they will be able to provide essential invoice details such as date, amount, status meaning accepted, rejected, that kind of status, and other relevant information submitted to IRB in the following format. Now, the formats can be XML or JavaScript, metadata, which I don't know what it is, CSV report, I really don't know what it is, grid, I also don't know, PDF, I know number 4, 1 and number 5. So the format of your information provided to you is also variable. Oh yes. In my case, I prefer PDF because when they give me the information PDF, I can then convert it to Word and then use it as I like for my reporting. But end of the day, details of your invoices will be there, right? And notice the details are invoice date, amount, invoice status, other relevant information, which is amount and whatnot. But ladies and gentlemen, they still want you to maintain a copy of the invoice because it's got information about your buyer as well. And you may not have full information of your buyer in your dashboard services. Yes, they may not have full information of your buyer in your dashboard system. Now, via API, like I explained to you, API allows taxpayers to submit invoice directly to IRB, which must be only in XML, JavaScript, only these two formats. It cannot be in any other format, right? You can have direct integration of taxpayers' ERP system with my invoice system, meaning your system has an API integrating with IRB. Ladies and gentlemen, only the large multinational, the large GLCs are doing this. Oh yeah, people, large multinational, large GLCs are doing this, where they are communicating directly with the income tax system. Now, most of the others here, like all the other people I know, right? All the other people I know, they are going through a service provider. Oh yeah, people, service provider meaning someone else has an API with income tax. Right? So with someone else having an API with income tax, right? What's going to happen is that your system will generate the e-invoice, which will then, through using this service providers, be connected to them. So, like I told you, if you go for number one, you got heavy investment upfront. If you go for number two and three, smaller investment upfront, very small investment, manageable investment for big companies, but you got monthly subscriptions. You definitely got monthly subscription. Now, taxpayer would need to configure API integration by setting up callback specific taxpayer system addresses. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just as a matter of clarification, right? This ensures sorry, right, with the My Invoice portal. Now, why am I stressing on this? One of the issues brought up to me, I mean, whenever we discuss this, wherever we go, people always like to discuss about the part about data security. Now, as far as I know, most of my friends, and I'm sure many of you, the Padu system, many of them did not want to get into the Padu system saying that, oh, I'm not sure whether my data will be secure. What if someone hacks it? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will only tell you this based on my experience. That is, I can't guarantee things, but based on my experience, I'll tell you this that income tax has been one of the government agencies which have been very careful with data security. Now, I've heard of breach of government portals, including Jabatan Pendaftaran Negara portal. All of it have been breached, SSN, all of them have had data breaches, but income tax never. They are very careful, they are very good, and in my opinion, there's going to be no such thing as a data breach. Even with software to software, they've come up with sufficient controls, right? So they've got a specific callback system which need to be set up, and it ensures that unauthorized systems cannot get into the income tax portal, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I do not expect any breach on the part of income tax, right? I don't expect them to have a breach. Now, why is there a delay? So, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, there is a slight delay. Um, the large companies were supposed to implement by 1st July this year, but it went off to August, right? It's simply because of the fact that there were going to be technical issues. And that is why you see API configuration will be included in the system development kit. Now, again, it's not a ruling, it's a kit which was expected to be issued in Q4 of 2023. But, ladies and gentlemen, that was what income tax told us when they initially issued the public guide. But when it came out, it only came out February this year. So, yeah, the system development kit came out in February and they revised it again in April. And remember, it's going to come out in August. The system must be ready in August, right? The system development kit is for technology providers, not for you and me, right? They came out late with it and they are still pushing on, and I'm very sure it will be implemented. The problem was the integration part, right? Everybody keeps talking about it, yes, ladies and gentlemen, but it's quite comprehensive. This part is for those who are going to go for API. Now, for those of us not going for API, cannot learn, right? It's either your XML, extensive markup language, extensible markup language, or JavaScript. And all I can tell you people is this: I am no IT expert, but I can tell you that these languages are for people. I mean, those who are involved in technology and software engineering and all that, you will understand. These formats, languages are not, it's not easy, it's not amendable. Unlike PDF format and Word format, even PIF, they say you can scan, create Word file and all these things. I'm told that these two not amendable. So income tax have selected some of the best. So people, there are a lot of technical issues coming up, right? Now, data field falls into 51 types of data field, right? Fields are grouped into 9 categories. Address of the buyer and seller. Now, buyer's address, public sales may not be available. Seller's address, definitely you know your own address, Rakavan. So there is no such thing as not having the address. So seller's address must have. Buyer's address may have. Business to business should have. Business to consumer may not have. Right? May not have. Where you can turn around and put that not applicable as I showed you. Business details. The name of the company, buyer's business detail must know. Sorry, seller's business detail must know. Right? Okay, buyer's details, sorry people, I'm just going to put this out and write some things there. As much as I've spoken about it, I just want to clarify that some things possible, some things not possible. If it's a sale to the public, not necessary. right? Business detail, address, right? Sorry, I'm just going to copy paste it, right? So, right, compulsory, right? Now, tax identification number. Now, something that we must all look at. Also compulsory. But of course, there are generic things, right? Generic thing is like sale to the public. I mean, we can't go and ask everybody for their tax identification number. So obviously we get that. Now, same thing with contact number, right? Buyers compulsory except for sale to the public. I mean, you don't sell to someone who doesn't have a phone number. Now, invoice details, right? Here is where you got your product, your quantity, things like that, right? And here is where when we speak about details, I want to show you something that IRB have done, right? Sorry, people. I just want to show you examples given by IRB because a lot of people like to say things like, and you can see this here. Now, this is a display of a smartphone. Now, they sold a smartphone to this guy. And the thing is, they just put the smartphone. Now, they didn't say what model, what income tax wants to know. It's a smartphone, it costs 2,500. The person is eligible for lifestyle relief. Full stop. It doesn't have to be specific to state the version level of what do you call that? Apple Pro 8 lab, Apple Pro 11 lab, version 12 lab. Not necessary. As much as the guide generically will tell you, oh, you need to give details of the sale. Well, ladies and gentlemen, details that are sufficient to determine the item being sold or bought. Sufficient, that's all. Right? And remember, that's all that is needed, not anything else. Right? Okay, now I ran through roughly the appendix 1 earlier, so that's that. Okay, payment info. Now, detail, sorry, people. I just want to emphasize some things. Which they then came and clarified later. Invoice detail, fine, parties, yeah, buyer, seller, payment info. Optional. Whether you give them 30-day credit or you don't give them 30-day credit, income tax really doesn't care. Right? Type of product or services, yes. I showed you the example and it's also business detail. Unique identifier number. Right? Compulsory, right? And here is where number, right? And I think you can see that invoice number. Ladies and gentlemen, all documents must have your company's number, company's invoice number, as well as income tax number. It can be a simple number, right? It can be a very simple number, but they want you to have numbering systems, right? So that when they come in for a tax audit, you don't say, I do not know where to find the document, right? People, details are important, and you need to determine the details that are compulsory and the details that are optional, and that is where quite a lot of flexibility comes in. Right? Sorry, again, I messed up. Right? Taxpayer needs to configure the system. Now, this is for those using API. A key component of e-invoicing is TIN. So, ladies and gentlemen, any e-invoice created without a tax identification number will never be validated. Right? And it should be pre-validated by the issuer to ensure e-invoice clearance and accuracy. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, you must. What I'm going to tell you next is ridiculous, but you must pre-validate your company's TIN. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all of us know what our TIN is, right? It's just that in the past, all of us merely remembered our IC numbers, right? All of us merely remembered our IC numbers. Today, if we are in business and if we are going to obtain e-invoices in our name, we need to, like in my case, right, because I run a business, I may need I will need e-invoices in my name or my business name. And in the case of sole traders, your name, your TIN is also your business TIN. Because with sole traders, there is no such thing as business TIN and individual TIN. It's all one TIN. If you notice, all of us running businesses, at one time we were all OG, now it's SG. Sorry, it's now IG. Now it's IG because they standardized it for all individuals to be individual group. And the reason is simple. If from being an employee, you now become a business owner, or while being an employee, you have a business on the side, right? Selling cakes or whatever not like. You need to submit the Borang B. So now, without changing your tax number from ST to OG like those days, you straight away go on to your tax portal. Because your IG, you can either download and submit your business income, Borang B, or you can download and submit DE. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, either one. Which is why this part where income tax says you must pre-validate your TIN number. It would be validated. You definitely know it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, consolidated e-invoice is not allowed for certain industries. Oh yeah, consolidated e-invoice is not allowed for certain industries. The first one is automotive. And if you're buying a car, or if you're buying a car brand new or second hand, ladies and gentlemen, they must issue a individual invoice. They cannot issue consolidated e-invoice, which means when you buy a car, they expect you to provide the necessary information. Remember, when you buy a car, you cannot say sorry, people. I just want to clarify on this because a lot of people have issues here, right? Not, there is no issue. It's just that people get confused, right? For each transaction. Now, first one, automated, right? It can be but transaction between ladies and gentlemen, if you are buying my car, I am not in the car business. You are buying my car, my personal car. Ladies and gentlemen, I sell it to you. No invoicing. It's only when you buy it from the companies, businesses. Only when you buy it from businesses. If you're buying it from companies and businesses, yes. So for individuals, if you're selling your personal car, it's not your company car, it's your personal car, you're selling it, it's not been recorded in the company's accounting record, ladies and gentlemen, no e-invoicing. Oh yes. And that is for, what do you call that? Automotive industry. Now, another industry is, of course, aviation. Aviation industry. Now, obviously, for each transaction. Now, obviously, the ticket is purchased. From an overseas airline airline. You must sell them, right? Now, of course, what happens if you are traveling overseas, you're buying your own ticket online. If it's for personal travel, they don't want to know, right? Of course, someone then came and said, "Oh, that means if I have illegal income, I can fly overseas, I can buy Qatar." Yeah, you can buy, but if you are going through KLIA and they notice that you've been going out very often, then they will ask you, "Hello, friend, where did you get your money? How come you're not a taxpayer? How come you're traveling so often?" Right? So there are other ways of detection, people. Here, they are merely talking about airline tickets being purchased for business purposes, not for personal purpose. Personal purpose is a line charity, right? For business purpose, whatever ticket purchased, there must be an e-invoice, right? Okay. Now, the third one, luxury goods and jewelry. Now, With luxury goods and jewelry, I'm not going to put it down because the regulation is not out yet. Now, ladies and gentlemen, luxury goods and jewelry, they have postponed the luxury good tax. Oh yeah, I mean, they were supposed to implement luxury good tax this year, and since there was going to be a tax on it, they wanted it included into e-invoice. But ladies and gentlemen, they postponed the luxury good tax. Oh yes, they postponed it. Jewelry and luxury good tax has been postponed indefinitely, and the reason is quite simple. They postponed it because I mean the people who buy luxury goods and jewelry, big amount, not small one, not the teeny weeny one that people like you and me buy, are the rich and famous, ladies and gentlemen. They can afford to fly to Singapore and buy it. Oh yeah, they can afford to go to Singapore and buy it because if you're going to tax them a lot of money, they might as well go into Singapore where there is no tax on luxury goods and jewelry and buy it there. Right? So luxury goods and jewelry tax has been postponed. And mind you, which is good news for the businesses that are selling luxury goods and sorry, people who are selling luxury goods and jewelry, because since they have been postponed, the tax has been postponed, and income tax has come back and said they will provide the details later. Up till the time income tax gives some guidance, they can use self-billing. So if any of you belong to luxury goods or jewelry retail shops, consolidated e-invoice is still possible for them. Oh yeah, consolidated e-invoice is still possible for them. Right? Now, the next one, wholesalers and retailers of construction material. Now, please remember, again, retail material. Now, please remember, the best way to illustrate this is hardware shops only. Now, what do we mean by construction material? You're talking about people who sell roof tiles and cement and sand and those kind of things. Mr. DIY does not get into that, right? So these people must generate individual e-invoices, right? Now, if they generate individual e-invoices, again, remember, they are doing retail. Now, with retail, you still can issue the general public e-invoice. That means you don't have the necessary detail. You issue public e-invoice, but you need to issue individual e-invoices. Oh, yes, you need to issue individual e-invoices, right? And that's all. Construct people who are dealing hardware shops, especially, what they have told us is, yeah, but we can't do consolidated. Yes, you can't do consolidated anymore. Hardware shops must do individual e-invoice. Now, of course, they can go and look at the they can look at there's a nice word, what do you call that? Is the spreadsheet, right? Where they go for batch generation. They can go for batch generation, right? But they cannot use consolidated, where they report the sale 7 days after the end of the month. Oh yeah, people, please remember, only consolidated invoice can report the sale 7 days after. I mean, they are one of those who can report it 7 days after the thing, right? Okay, one more. Hopefully, relevant ladies and gentlemen, hope you all can see this. license and betting and gaming. That is your gambling lah, right? Your gambling. Empat number eko, dama chai and the lights, right? The gaming companies must right. Tan, I can share. When you signed up for this program, did you provide your email address to the organizer? Tan? Yes, no. Yes, very good. I will forward it to the person in charge. I mean, Chin Yi, she's the person who contacts me and does everything. Now they will then get it forwarded to you. No problem, right? No problem, right? Okay. Now, so people, very good at this one. Oh yeah, it's very good. Implementation for casinos and don't ask me why. Don't ask me why, right? So if you go to Gandhi and win, ladies and gentlemen, no, I mean, and you win a lot of money, no issue, no issue at all, right? They have postponed it, right? They have really postponed it, and don't ask me why. As much as I disagree with that, right? But ladies and gentlemen, I'm not the one making the decision. The last one is very important. Why is it important? I will explain to you. Payment to agent, dealers, and distributors. Now, ladies and gentlemen, and this is going to be something that is going to happen very soon. People like Amway, sorry, people, I'm quite old. As such, I do not know the new direct selling company. Amway Causeway, right? The one I belong to is Causeway, right? They need to issue a e-invoice, self-bill with my TIN, which I have not asked me yet. I don't know why, right? So they're going to use the general public TIN and issue an e-invoice in my name to inform income tax of the income I've earned in terms of what do you call that? In terms of commission. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are doing all this side business, income tax will soon know your income, right? Because when you sign up for all this MBA courses, the least they have is your IC number, lah. So they can track. And I know most people do not bother disclosing this to the income tax. I did not disclose the coupons I got from Causeway to income tax. So people, I'm not accusing you of being the only people who are not following the law, me included. Oh yeah, me included, right? And that is why, right? Payment to the children. So these 7 people are different. No consolidated e-invoice. They must issue individual invoices. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've looked at the system, we've looked at the documentation, like I told you, the process and the documentation we spoke about, it all comes under documentation, right? System, API, or my tax invoice. Now, another very important part, okay, details. Now, another important part is the disbursement or reimbursement. Now, with disbursement or reimbursement, is if you are involved in a business where you incur cost on behalf of your customer. Yes, you incur the cost on behalf of your customer. Now, incurring cost on behalf of your customer, the issue comes in only when the invoice is issued, but the invoice is issued directly to the customer, but you pay for it first, and then you claim reimbursement, right? And this is where there are some issues. Reimbursement refers to out-of-pocket expense incurred to the payee, incurred by the payee, right, in the course of rendering services or sales of goods to the payer. That's the buyer. Such expense simple cost of airfare, traveling, accommodation, telephone, or photostatic. This, like for example, your auditors now. Things like disbursement out-of-pocket expenses incurred by payer and paid by third party. By paying in connection with services rendered or sales of good by payee to the payer. Right? Currently, suppliers would include the reimbursement disbursement in their invoice to the buyer. Now, there are certain terminologies. Now, section 5.5, 5.6 is from the guide. Supplier 1 represents the first supplier, supplier 2 represents the third party or the intermediary. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is an example given by income tax. Right? The first one, supplier 1, right, provides something, but the invoice is given to the invoice is issued to the buyer, the eventual person. But the problem is supplier 2 pays to supplier 1. Then must recover the money from the buyer. Right? Can you issue an invoice? Answer no. So let's look at what happens. Oh yes, this is sometimes the case. Most of the people I encounter this with is with freight forwarders and those people, right? Now, provide goods or services to supplier to supplier to pays supplier 1. Right? Now, in this scenario, right, must invoice goods and services provided by them. And not the payment made. Right, because remember, one transaction, one invoice. If supplier 2 also invoices the customer for the payment made, ladies and gentlemen, there is 2 expenses that the customer has got 2 invoices, one from supplier 1, supplier 2. Right? Now, to recover the payment made, only has to provide your bank transfer. You just print out the bank transfer, provide it to the customer and tell him, look, process payment. And that's good. And this is income tax solution. Now, some companies say, oh, cannot, must have some document. Fine, create some document other than the word invoice, credit note, debit note. Create another document, right? You could always create a document, say, claim for disbursement. Create one. Give it to the joker. Ask them to process the payment. Right? Now, the problem in this scenario will be, but if charges a fee for we have it must be included. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the fee must be included. Right? And mind you, the people who complain to me about this is the freight forwarders. You see, when the freight forwarders were brought into the service tax thing, right? Most of these guys were telling the customer, oh, I'm doing you a service, I paid the custom agent, I paid this fla, I paid this fla, I'm not making anything, I paid on behalf of you lah. Because at the end of the day, right, they charge the fee. There must be an e-invoice, right? If you charge a fee, there must be an e-invoice. Now, remember, you do not create an invoice for any product or service you did not provide. You did not provide, right? Income tax was very clear about this, right? And this scenario is the one that worries everybody, right? Okay. Now the second one, no problem. Supplier 1 provides the goods or service to supplier 2, who then provides it to the buyer, and they invoice the supplier 2. Like for example, I'm the example given, I'm an event organizer, right? On behalf of my client, I get flowers lah, I get decor lah, I get a band lah, whatever not lah, all the other things. I pay the hotel lah, I pay everything. Now, if all these suppliers invoiced me, no problem. I pay them because the invoice is in my name. Then I directly give a lump sum payment to them. There is no disbursement, reimbursement, and all. Right? That is not a problem. As if the invoice is to supplier 2, fantastic. No issue. But if the invoice was to supplier 1, ladies and gentlemen, there is a problem. Now, this is for businesses, right? For businesses. Now, those of you in HR, this is the last part, ladies and gentlemen, coming to the end right now. employment, requisite, and benefit. Now, one of the things you must remember is this. Oh, sorry. Employees are not expected to issue e-invoice zero, right? Now, on the other hand, on employment expenses. So anything with to do with employees, there is no need for, it's exempted from e-invoicing. Exempted is the word I use, ladies and gentlemen. Because remember, your benefit in kind, your salaries, your allowances, all that, no e-invoicing, right? No e-invoicing whatsoever. Employment income people, right? Allowances, apa-apa pun lah. If your company pays for your gym, your club membership, professional subscription, outside the scope of e-invoicing, right? The payroll is enough. Now, where employees are allowed to claim expenses incurred in performing their duties for an employer, employees are required to prove authenticity of such expenses with supporting documents. Yes, right? If you want to make a claim from your employer, you need to decide. As such expenses claimed by employees would be recorded as employer's expense reported for tax purposes. Under the e-invoice system, when sale or transactions are concluded, employees are required to request for an e-invoice to be issued to the employer for proof of expense to the extent possible. Ladies and gentlemen, keyword is what? Extent possible, right? That means if it's not possible, also can, right? Now, income tax is being very flexible here. Oh yeah. Now, IRB recognizes the potential challenges in getting e-invoice to be issued in the name of the employer. In this regard, IRB provides the following concession, right? Now, what is the concession? Now, let's look at it. Business will be allowed to proceed with the use of e-invoice issued in the name of the employee or existing supporting document, which means even if there is no invoice, e-invoice, right? And they use the word existing supporting document issued by supplier to support the particular transaction as proof of expense, right? For tax purposes. Now, let's look at some very, what shall I say, common examples. Right, very common example, right? In small companies, again, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately I am focusing quite a bit on small companies because most of the large companies are already video. I mean, many of them had trainings as early as April, right? Most of them had it by April, May. Only one I did in late May, right? This month, no large companies, right? Now, example. employee disbursement. Sorry, people. Employee disbursement, right? For the pantry, right? Entertainment of customers, right? These are two very common examples. Entertainment of customers, right? Where you need to incur a cost on behalf of your employer, right? I know many people will tell me, oh, but this pantry thing we normally take from petty cash. But ladies and gentlemen, assuming the manager pays for it himself, I mean, the manager pays for it, then he puts it as a claim. Now, in this case, you can still claim can be made, right? The claim can be made using receipts ah, right? Right? So people, company policy. So HR, right? The HR department should ensure, right, that this exception to the event is only applicable if the benefits are clearly stated in the employee's policy, right? But I mean, they say that, yeah, if you pay your telephone bill, you can claim it back. Is it in the employment policy? Now, ladies and gentlemen, sorry. If it's not in the employment policy, then they can't claim. They can't claim, right? So, for example, this is more for bills, right? Example of bills will be they pay for their phone bill, you allow them to claim, right? And whatnot, right? Now the next one, expenses incurred. Sorry, I jumped the gun, people. Now, the example I've given on the white paper is this: expenses incurred by employee on behalf of the employer, right? Employee may certain expenses on behalf of the employer, such as not limited to accommodation, toll, mileage, parking, telecommunication expenses incurred in a foreign country, right? You send someone for a meeting overseas, and they come back having spent money there, and they put in the invoices, right? Now, again, the overseas hotel doesn't have the invoice system. And even when Grab will issue an e-invoice to you, right? Grab will not issue an e-invoice to you on grounds that you have not given the details or not requested for it, right? So as such, you pay on behalf of the employer. Again, sorry, and they tell you to the extent possible. So they want an e-invoice if possible, but if not possible, pun boleh, right? Now, will be allowed to proceed to use e-invoice issued in the name of the employee or existing supporting document issued by supplier. Now, all this is in the event of employee paid for expenses incurred if employer is able to prove that the employee has acted on the employer's behalf in incurring the expenses, right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I just need to make a small change to this, what I just, okay. Sorry. Okay. I now large businesses, no problem. No problem. Now, the distinction comes is here. Benefit in kind or requisites, right? Requisites are things that your employer provides you. Now, example, phone bills, parking, etc. Now, the right to claim must be included in the oh yeah, the right to claim must be there, right? So people things like pre-receipt, benefit in kind, the boss tell you pay and then you claim back, right? So whatever said and done, I mean the basic fundamental is this one. When it comes to employees, no e-invoicing, no self-billing, right? No e-invoicing, no self-billing. Now, one of the things that can go wrong in companies is this. Big boss goes out to entertain a customer and they go into one of the big five-star hotel where they open the big bottle, right? People, that's the one I hate most. It can be 2,000-3,000 ringgit a night, right? The big entertainment. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is under here. You need to be able to prove that the customer that was entertained is a client of the business. And that's the kind of thing. I mean, this you talk to your tax agent and you should be fine with that. So people, remember, anything to do with employees, no e-invoicing, no self-billing. Right? Basic fundamental of people. Right. Now, having spoken about that, I mean, this is this is one of the important parts of income of e-invoicing, which is on employees. Now, the rest of it, well, there are some businesses which can make statements of bill on periodic basis, right? Example, digital or electronic payments Like for example, you want an e-invoice from people like who provide digital services, right? They will invoice you on a monthly basis. Financial services like your banks, ladies and gentlemen, banks charge you an interest, right? They will discount. And on the other hand, with banking sector, also another issue is interest you earn from the banks and financial institutions. The banks will give you a self-bill. So you don't have to issue, your company doesn't have to issue an e-invoice to the bank with regards to interest earned. Taperlu. Healthcare. When you go and hopefully nobody has to incur that. When staff members go and spend time in the hospital. Now, when I use spend time, you know what I'm trying to say. I mean people go and get admitted. Now, normally the hospital bill will be for a period of time, 3 days, 5 days, week. My longest was 12 days, right, people? And they gave me one bill for the whole 12 days. Insurance, you get invoice based on your insurance premium dates. Stockbroking, you buy and sell share. Even now, it's on a periodic basis where at the end of the week, end of the month, you get a statement from your stockbroker. Telecommunication, your phone. Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, technically speaking, DG should have asked me if I wanted an e-invoice. They have not asked them. Maybe next month I will write to them and say, please give me an e-invoice. These are my details. Self-bill. Now, this is critical. Payment to agent, dealers, and distributors. Now, ladies and gentlemen, generally this is for commissions and payments to these people. Now, dealers and agents do not invoice their principals, because dealers and you must distinguish distributors from trading houses. Trading houses buy your product and sell your product. Distributors merely sell your product and collect a commission from you. So A is for those who are earning commissions. Ladies and gentlemen, it's self-billing. And they want to know this because they want to be able to detect, because there's a 2% withholding tax on commissions paid to agents, provided it goes above a certain threshold, but that's a different topic by itself. So they want to get to know that goods sold or services rendered by foreign suppliers. Obviously, foreign suppliers, right? They are not part of your e-invoicing, so we need to do self-bill to record our transaction. Profit distributed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, distribution of dividend. The shareholders won't provide you with an e-invoice, but the company that is distributing dividend must issue an e-invoice. E-commerce transaction, ladies and gentlemen, the details have not been issued yet. Now, when we talk about e-commerce transaction, it's a whole big world. Currently, e-commerce transaction, like big people like your Lazada, Shopee, now they would be looking at general public, Lazada, Shopee. But there are these small e-commerce transactions. I mean, I've seen it when I go through my TikTok, right? Ladies trying to sell clothes, ladies trying to sell makeup, a lot of them, and they would all fall under this. It will also go under self-bill when a business buys from these people. Oh yes. Now remember, self-bill is billing by the buyer, right? So they've not come out with the whole thing yet. So if your company buys from Lazada, right? Let's take a look at it. Your company buys from Lazada or Shopee. Now, obviously, Lazada is not going to give you a e-invoice. They are going to go for consolidated e-invoice. So your details won't be there. They will be recognizing their income and end the story. So you need to do a self-bill to recognize the purchase using Lazada. Now, payout to all betting and gaming, I spoke to you about it. And finally, acquisition of goods or services from individual taxpayers. So if your company bought my car, ladies and gentlemen, your company will e-invoice me because I'm not in the car buying thing. Now let's get to something bigger than car. There are jewelry shops and bullion houses that buy back old jewelry from individuals. I know my wife goes and sells the old jewelry and makes, she then gets the money and goes and buys new jewelry. And she goes to this particular place where they are being businesses buying back old jewelry. So they will have to e-invoice them because the people who are selling are not in the jewelry business. So you need to e-invoice. So ladies and gentlemen, there can be times when you will be, one very big business that we could all get into, but we need the technology is scrap. Scrap. Now, if we are buying scrap from businesses, which is where the big money is, the company that is selling scrap to us will e-invoice us. Fantastic. Right? For us to recycle. On the other hand, if we are buying scrap from individual taxpayers, right, households, then of course you need to have a site. Right? So people, the system is there. It's just a matter for you to understand it. Final but very important last slide, right, ladies and gentlemen. If you are selling to the retail business, you need to do general public, right? So the name will be general public, and you will use this generic e-invoice, right? Generic e-invoice, right? And you must remember that the generic invoice is whenever we don't have the tin in a consumer sale. Now remember, the generic e-invoice for general public is not allowed when it's business to business. It must be business to consumer. Then you can use this generic thing, right? When you're selling it to overseas customers, foreign customers may not. I use the word may not because unique you use this generation number is for all foreign customers. Now, for foreign suppliers without a Malaysian tin, you would use this. So it is 102030. And ladies and gentlemen, these tins indicate that there is no discount. So, like I said, you need to learn to think where to go, right? Please post your questions in the chat box. Yes. Anyone? Any question? See, no one. I think we give you 2 minutes or so. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, 1 minute plus. If you have got no questions, since I've got nothing else to tell you, and I see no one attempting to type. Now, I will forward the white sheet of paper I typed on to the organizers, who will then forward it to you all, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll tell you this: think about the system. It's a system. Now, I tried showing you. I didn't want to get into the IT technical part, which are the areas where there are many issues, right? Like, whereas on the other hand, as far as the system part, income tax has clarified almost everything, right? System meaning that how you implement it for your organization, right? Will be something that you need to sit down and think about. And like I said earlier, if you are buying things from the general public, self-bill, you can't expect the general public to provide you with e-invoices. If a staff goes out and buys disbursements, staff goes out and buys something, allow the staff to claim back the money. You do not need an e-invoice, because you can't expect the staff to be carrying around the company's thing, right? So those kind of things they've already clarified. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have got no questions, I will thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen, and I will wish you all the best. Think about it and have a good weekend. Thank you. And Quorse, do you have anything to say? The representative from Quorse? Well, if you have nothing to say, if no one has anything to say, I will end this section now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.